Podemos arrancar? Good evening, everyone. We are here for one more session of our usual lectures from Docomomo, where we always try to bring mainly architects, but people that know about the city of Macau and that can bring some knowledge, additional knowledge from the one that we've been debating here. Well, without no much delays, I would like to first thank Fundação Rui Cunha for once again hosting this event and all the guests that are here present. I see many people that are also friends from Diogo and Cristina from many years. So let's start. I will first present Cristina and Diogo. Cristina Verissimo she's currently associate professor at the School of Architecture, Dalhousie House in University in Canada, and she also has a master degree from Harvard University. On top of this, she also taught at the Lisbon faculty architecture, and she's currently developing a PhD, a research on the possible new uses of the cork in architecture. As a professional architect, she worked in, I cannot say all over the world, but in many different places. She started in Lisbon, then she moved to Macau, where she spent the 90s working here with different, in Profilville at that time. Before that she worked with Zaha Hadid in London, and then moved back to Lisbon. Diogo Burnet is also an associate professor in the same school in Halifax, Canada, and he was also a former director of the architectural school. He has a master in architecture from the Bartlett School of London. He also taught in different universities, in Hong Kong Architectural School, the University of Lisbon, the College Design University of Minnesota, and the Architectural School in the University in Texas. As Cristina, he worked in different environments and cities, worked in Lisbon, worked in London at the BDP company, and after also in Macau. They've been recently the curators for the Lisbon Architectural Triennale, and they are both founders of the CVDB Architects Office, founded in 1999, where they developed multiple projects and buildings and urban interventions that has been exhibited and published worldwide. So, Cristina, Diogo, the stage is yours. Please.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. We left 26 years ago, and I have to say we still have friends here, which are the best thing in the world. Macau changed quite a lot, but for our delight is much nicer, I would say. The old city is here, and the new city is full of life. We've still not been visiting a lot, especially the Taipei and Kluan, but we're going to do it tomorrow. So we're very excited to be here, and thank you so much for this invitation. We are delighted to be here. So, okay. So we've been, like Sergio was saying, we've been all over the world, but for the past 12 years, it's pretty much between both sides of the Atlantic, which is wonderful for us because the difference is pretty much 4 hours. And we keep on commuting every other month to Lisbon because we still have our office there. Our work is mainly public work because we work through competitions. We apply to competitions, and luckily we win quite a few. Just to give you two examples or a few examples, which is the ones on top, which were built. The ones on the left is an elderly center. We recently win a competition to a residence, but in this case for young people, so we're going to have another building there. And then we are under construction with the Court of Law, Supreme Court of Law of Macau, and this is the students' residencies that will be done next week or something, so it's almost finished. We also were, like Sergio was explaining, it was a wonderful experience for us because it was the Lisbon Triennale, we call it Terra, issues about the planet and transformations, what we have to think in terms of architecture. And we had a wonderful team of curators because it was 5 exhibitions, so 5 teams of curators. So it was quite a huge event that was finished in 2022. We are now Biennale curators for Latin America, and we go into the Latin America, which is going to be in Peru in the month. So this is now.
So yes. So good evening. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you for the kind invitation. We usually start with this mirrored set of texts, as quite often we look at these topics. Program site, sketches, models, light, shadows, materials. And one of the things we always keep in mind is a very good saying from one of the key professors from the School of Porto, where Christina studied, which is in architecture, whatever value system we have, its opposite is something that we should also consider. And this, for us, aligns well with all these meandering and all these intercross references that we've been exposed to as we've been traveling around the planet for work and mostly to establish new friends. And one of the things that we always are interested in is in this notion of porosity, this notion of how, following the title of the talk, how interwoven architecture and landscape and cultures can be. So we have these images of what we would always imagine that cross sections could look like, where the built environment inside and outside are always establishing kind of a continuum and a flow of spaces that allow those of us who inhabit these spaces to enjoy the city life, the urban life, and the life in between and in buildings as a continuous experience.
So today what we're going to show you is we're going to dedicate this lecture to our heritage work, and what we're mainly focusing is a few topics, such as in terms of architecture, how can we create a balance between what we manage to do and the existing buildings. Please remember that we are in Portugal, public buildings, not a lot of money. So it means that we have to create the best with very little to be done. We always look into what exists there, so it's a constant survey of the existing building, and sometimes we're going to show one design, we find some archaeological items that then we include in the design. Improvement. Of course, some of the buildings are in bad condition. Some of them are in ruins. We have to adapt them to the legislation now. And we always want to preserve them for the next generation. So seismic laws and structure needs to be included. The design character is always the symbolic means between the old and the new. We're going to show you a few things, different things. How do we deal with that? Proportionality of interventions, how do we keep and how do you select, basically. And then again, participation. We always deal with the population, being very generic. Could be local population, could be in the school, for example, the teachers and the students. So we always talk in order to achieve the design, especially for this type of buildings, the participation is important. Equity, how do we ensure fair distribution of benefits, of how do we understand culture, and how do we safeguard the regime and what is in there. The respect of beliefs, traditions, customs, and so on is interesting because we came across, for example, particularities of a community that we did not expect their reaction, and we had to include their thoughts. And even though it was in Portugal, it was not expected. So that is something that we have to always pay attention. And then preservation, what we preserve, cultural values, artifacts, and so on. Now, in order to do this, teamwork is fundamental. We always have quite a large team in the design process. Consultants, we also have heritage people a lot of times. We have consultants of color, for example. So the team is quite broad, and we include it depending on the type of design we have. Oh, so this is me. Okay, so this is a good example of, is actually, we start with an urban design. This is a city that perhaps for some of you, you acknowledge this. Coruche is in the center of Portugal. It was very famous in Roman times because two rivers would connect there, and it became a hub to control the water. And from then on, they would go by boat to Alentejo. So it was a very important city. There used to be a castle over here. And now what they kept is pretty much this area, totally green, as you can see. This is the old city. This is the new city. What is important for you to understand is that this city, from the low part to the upper part, is quite a huge step. And the town hall came to us and said, we need to have universal mobility. Our old people need to go to the hospital. Most of them live down the hill or in the whole city, and our hospitals, schools, administration are always on the top side of the hill, and people always go up and down. So this is the view from above. The river is over there. Now, for a long time ago, Gonçalo Ribeiro Teles rehabilitated the underground of this area, which contains water, fresh water for the population, and it was done by a system, an underground system that we visit, and sometimes there are fountains over here. One thing that you look is that staircase is pretty much collapsing. The population did not want us to change anything. Even though they were coming up and down, it was a very hard work for us to explain to them that very soon these, the cliffs might fall down, and so we have to do some maintenance and recuperation. So for me, it was a long and hard work between administration and the population because they didn't want anything to be touched. So after we start to talk to them, they interact by saying what things they were interested to keep, and we were very attentive to that. So we had a huge area, like I said. In terms of natural areas, a lot of trees were not local, so we have to separate and clean the species, the natural vegetation. We also include some wet areas such as fountains and paths that the population was very pleased to find out. And then this is the staircase that we rehabilitate. And then by universal means, we include an elevator. That was also a discussion with the population, and they really liked the idea of that. So on the left side, there are the existing areas, and these are the bridge and the paths and the fountains we rehabilitate. They're still in construction, so some vegetation will grow, but it's what we're doing. So now these next slides will show you how the steep slope it was, 40 meters, that people have to walk up. And this is a sequence from the elevator to the top, how is the universal path. So people will go up through the elevator and they keep on going up until they reach a platform, so which is already on top of the hill. There is a sort of a viewpoint which is showed in this model. And then the universal mobility will go across the staircase and reach that level, which is one of the highest points there. So universal was achieved by creating this path that brings them vertically and then horizontally to the connection. The staircase was rehabilitated. These cliffs were settled and organized structurally, and then we create a sort of a shelter for people. If it was raining, people could be, protected. So these walls were all done, is now open to population. This is already the cross flyover for the mobility. People are very happy with this now. They really love the proposal, but it took us a long time for us to explain. So the elevator is very simple. It's just a vertical tower with these viewpoints and transparent spaces for the population to enjoy the view. And as I show you, it's an amazing view. Okay, so this is another one. This is another interesting situation. So this is in a village in Torres Novas. Torres Vedras, I'm so sorry. And this was the location. Now, interesting, this was pretty much a row of houses, and there was a building in the front of a square, and the population, not friendly, but they would cross literally a private property and go up to the other part of the city. So this is the lower area. They would cross the building and go up. So it was, let's call it an informal connection. When this gallery of art came to us, we said, okay, why don't we turn this public? Why, instead of keeping it still a little bit informal, why don't we turn it into formal? With an advantage, which is the fact that we can create an art gallery. So this, in terms of design, is like almost a box inside of the box, but we allow the public connection to go under, across, and up. Now, to bring art to the population, as you can imagine, as we left there, was very successful. And the population would go through rooms in the building that, of course, will have art, but they would interact, and through their path, they could see art, which was very successful. So the intervention, again, very simple with very little means, and this is already an exterior staircase. So this is the street that we turn it public. There are several houses are in fact part of this art gallery. Some of them are for artists residencies. Some of them are, administration. And the main exhibition areas are these two spaces. And as you can see, in terms of topography, is a very steep site, and yet very popular in terms of shortcut to lower area to upper area. We did this, another thing about team, we did this with Pedro Gadanha, I'm sure some of you know him, and it was this design in terms of idea is the box inside of the box, but almost as if the public space is this neutral color white, allows a lot of interventions and different things. Color will always be located in specific areas of the intervention.
We will do this a few times. So this is a competition for a school at the edge of Lisbon, and it's right located in an area that used to be just farms and agricultural fields, and you can see this is the second ring road. One recognizes the football stadiums, and we could easily map what used to be kind of the old path across the fields and how that is still somewhat perceived along the street that connects to several buildings. This area is very much residential, is in Telheiras in the northern part of Lisbon. And the competition called for the refurbishment of this old convent The convent had one of the wings that was a church, and the other two wings were completely abandoned. And so this was the kind of derelict state of the convent, and you can see that there's a series of additions through time, and there's the fence. This is the German school, and you can see kind of the surroundings of the residential projects and areas around the convent. It was in a real bad state, and as Christina already explained, for quite some years now, seismic considerations, whenever we touch an existing building, need to be taken into account. So this is the site. The interesting thing was that this is the Lisbon Underground, so we had a lot of restraints regarding the presence of urban infrastructures, and we looked at the convent as a source of inspiration in a way that we looked at the courtyard as a way to organize the building and program and life within this place, and established a series of strategies that expanded on the theme of the courtyards to organize the whole school. The school ranges from a bursary to 12th grade, so it has a wide range of ages, and we had to separate the courtyards and the playground areas just because of regulations, and also managing all these young children playing around different times of the day. So, and then around the edges, we set up a series of paths. So in a way, by allowing circulation to connect the different wings, obviously, but also for circulation to be always close to the playground areas. So this is a kind of a strategy. We were very concerned about the height of the new buildings. This big body here is the gymnasium, which is sunk a floor down, so we could see still the height of the convent free from any new buildings. So here you can see the several courtyards. So this is a kind of main entrance. It's an open courtyard. Obviously, we couldn't construct anything here. We refurbished these. This is where the main library is and the administration, and this is where the classrooms are. This is the children, the youngest ones, playground area, and this is the rest of the school playground area. And so then what we can see is a series of ramps and verandas and circulation elements that stitch the whole school and the different courtyards together. And also trying to make connections that would still be quite transparent, so we could see through the different courtyards. So in a way, what we were concerned was to establish a sense of holistic understanding of the school, where most of these kids enter when they're 2 or 3 or even younger and leave when they 15, 17. So you build a lot of memories by using all these different spaces as you grow older. And obviously issues about how old and new touches, so alignments, and we were very much concerned about keeping our additions as low as possible. So if you remember the photograph that I showed earlier, another thing, this is the main library. Another thing that we were also interested in was to celebrate the old construction techniques. So all these wooden structures were refurbished, and for us it would make sense that this part of the building would be as much public as possible to be enjoyed by all these generations of children throughout all their years at the school. And this is what you can see, the attempt of lowering the building, having a very horizontal line that in a way highlights the convent still as one of the oldest buildings in this area.
I think it's me. Yeah. So, oh no, Diogo, you go.
So this is an interesting competition because Arraiolos tapestry. Arraiolos is the name of a city, a small town in the south east of Lisbon, and it has a very particular tapestry that has this name of its own town. So they organized this competition for a small one cannot call it a museum because it lacks some of the programmatic elements that constitute a museum. It's a center to interpret the tapestry of Arraiolos. So we looked at these very strong Moorish patterns that have existed throughout times as a way to inspire how we could organize the museum. So the museum is located in the Arraiolos main square, where the town hall is located, and it's a site where the castle is very prominent. And you can see here that this is how the town celebrates this tradition, and the museum is right there, here. And the building we see on the left is a town hall. And so when we looked at this, we felt that the building had this really unique presence in the city. This building used to be a hospital. The hospital had 2 courtyards. And for those of us who are familiar with old hospitals, this was built in the 12th century. Courtyards were graveyards as well. So when we had to reinforce all the foundations, we came up with, let's say, a lot of skeletons, not in the closet, but a lot of skeletons under the ground. And according to archaeological legislation in Portugal, one needs to stop and document everything, and this was a tremendous question we had on site. So the building is organized in a simple way where the ground level is where all the public programs are located. By doing research with an archaeologist consultant, realized that, so this is one of the courtyards, that's another courtyard there. This building had been a police station, had been a social security offices, and all these courtyards had been built and occupied throughout time. So we realized that this central courtyard was really crucial because we could see that by reestablishing this void, we could then organize a whole program around this courtyard. So you arrive, you take a few steps, you get to this space which is a void, and circulation above and below always go back to this central element in the project, which is this space here, where there's the stairs, there's a lift. The interesting component of the competition program was number 10 there, which was an artist studio. So what they wanted to do was to invite artists to generate new forms of patterns of tapestries through digital artwork. So that's one of the courtyards, that's another courtyard there, and this is the educational spaces, the multi-purpose space, the educational room here. And we always felt that by having big glass panes here, although complicated in terms of structure and maintaining the existing walls, would allow for the public and the artists to be connected with each other. The stone on the floors and walls is all local stone from Alentejo and binds the ground floor as one entity. And we're just going to see some photographs taken from different spots. The staircase, the first courtyard that I'm talking about, you go up and have this little veranda to look out. And one of the things we managed to do was to align the windows above. So we would loop on the floor above around this courtyard, and we would be able, just by the sheer alignment of the walls, of the windows, to see through the town hall and onto the castle within the museum. The other interesting thing was that this was not a place to exhibit paintings. So the protection of the exhibition content in terms of filtering daylight were very different from a typical museum. This is a chapel. This is what Christina was talking about. Halfway construction, we also found out there are some containers of paint under the floor, and we also realized that the chapel had double height, so we had to figure out a different way to connect the ceiling and the structural slab and the ceiling to allow for some of these paintings that were only found out during construction to be again revealed and shown to the public. That's the first floor. As one can see, the exhibition spaces, the floor is all wood, and we can loop around, and you can see the kind of alignment of the windows, and this is where the permanent exhibition is located. Another interesting thing for us was how then we designed the ceilings, combining and allowing for a mixture of natural light and artificial light. So there's all kinds of skylights at the center of these spaces. This is a wooden structure that was kept, and there's an artificial light that allows some artifacts to be lightened from the edge of the walls. Again, this is one of the spaces where we kept the wooden structure of the roof, and this is how these spaces are being filled in with content. And then this is the facade of the educational room, and we were working with an historian who had done a lot of work with this tradition. He picked up a tapestry that we followed and developed a pattern that reproduced the tapestry as a facade. The bottom panels are doors that can open, that would then kind of bring the tapestry to an urban and architectural scale. These are just examples and drawings during construction, photographs of the building and construction. We had to gut out the building completely, and I think these are just images of the new facade. Using pigmentation, color, and types of mortar that would be respectful to the old buildings was also quite important. Yours now.
Okay, thank you. This is a totally different project, and I can explain you why. This was a school, part of the what was the name? The Parque Escolar. So it was one of the work that the government give to renovate schools in Portugal. Around 100 and something schools were renovated. So again, we managed to get this school. There was an intention of the team of designers to keep as much of the existing school as possible. The location of our school was very particular. There was a huge valley. There was this kind of main road, and the connection, the main entry for the school was here. In terms of relationship, the school, and we had meetings with teachers, and they were saying, but the school doesn't work. We don't want the pavilions because it's very windy and we can't dwell outside. The teachers were even saying that there was not a possibility for them to go from one side to the other without getting any rain. So the classrooms were separated. But this was the intention of Parque Escolar, was to keep this. So what we did after listening to the population was, okay, if this is the existing school, let's subtract the ones that we can't do. They were already additions in the past, and the engineers told us they will collapse. So we had to demolish them. And then we decided, okay, we're going to keep the maximum as we can. And then what we did was, through a stitching process, an interweaving process, we create a new building that would that would connect all the existing volumes. This is the gymnasium, and those are classrooms. Now, there was also a problem in this school, which was about the topography. The topography was not flat, which means that since we have to create universal mobility within the school, we had to find a way to, in a way, allow the valley to enter and ecologically refresh the school, but at the same time, the new building had to dwell with the existing buildings, but in a way that they would be at the same level. So what we did was, actually, we decided to create an outdoor space. The students were always telling us we need a place to be, and they even said Learning Square should be the name. And there was a connection with the valley, with the topography, and then we designed a school that you see the existing buildings are those. Now, this is a playful thing, because in the office we say, well, okay, what if this is a game? What if the children would see architecture as a tool or as a game? So we went to these mathematic games, and what we did, we start to design the classroom. The classroom has multiple possibilities of organization, and the classroom was studied according to the sunlight, etc., etc. and it became a moat. Let's call it is the type of Lego that are always the same, and those play a certain tune which repeats constantly. And then in between those rhythms, which are always the same, are the exceptional spaces, which we call the learning spaces. And those spaces are the informal areas. Now, this classroom, of course, very neutral. The types of materials for insulation, the colors and everything. We even had our consultant telling us that the classrooms could not be white. They are gray. If you put a white paper on the wall, you can distinguish there is a slight color of gray, so that the pupil of the students would not became too dilated and they will fall asleep. So anyway, you see these details that we went through. And these are the examples of those particular spaces, which we call it informal spaces. And the school is organized by that. Now, if you look carefully, these areas, these repeated classrooms, are the existing buildings. So in a way, the DNA of the existing buildings, and this one's existing buildings too, became the DNA of the school. So in a way, you don't per se, two of them, see them totally, but they exist and they are there. Now, these are always the school is organized, the classrooms again in brown color, the informal study areas are there, the circulations, we make them as if they were streets of learning, since we had a square of learning, and then auditorium, main entry, and so on. The informal spaces start to have different design, different headrooms, the locations in relation one to the other, so those will be the ones that the students understand. And this is the example of the learning square. As I told you, we pretty much try to make this as cheap as possible, so the cement blocks are organizing the corridors and everything, and this is an acoustic cement blocks that we managed to organize too. I'm going to tell you a little bit later. Circulation, vertical circulation, points of reference for the students, and this is the only moment that the students have to go up and down, therefore there is an elevator there. This is another informal space that we create as an auditorium in good connection with the landscape, but this we would expect them to use for arts. This is another space, informal one, a little bit of Barraga inspiration, I would say, but they love to be there by themselves. So the possibility of those spaces to be according what the students need. In terms of color, we had João Nuno Pernão is an architect that studied with us the colors. We use primary colors, and they were distributed through the building according to that. So this is the cement block, which is an acoustic, like I told you before. This was just used for parking. It was a very cheap material, only the color was pink, not very well fabricated, because there was a lot of porosity, and this was specially for industrial areas. And we asked them, okay, can you make it better? Can you have it as the same gray color, for example? So in working with them, we defined this strategy of a cheap block. Acoustically, it would work fine and would allow us an important thing, which is they told us, okay, if you need this to be a little bit higher than that row, it's okay, because it's just a matter of putting extra cement or not. That was helpful because, again, the existing building was there and sometimes the heights were not the same. And then in some cases we painted, and this is the auditorium. So this is the main entry. Sometimes you have the skylights open, the light will come straight from above, and this is the staircase that takes them up to classes, and also through this corridor they will go to their classes. Now, the existing buildings were very hard to maintain. In terms of seismic possibilities, were very hard, and we have to almost take them to the structure, and then we reinforce the structure, and then we add to the buildings. Over that, we designed these panels. And if you remember the children's game we were doing, the matrix is always the same. So these panels, there are only 7 different panels that can be organized in different ways. So it doesn't seem that there is a lot of repetition, and yet they play all the same tune in order to arrive. Prefabrication, we also designed the panels in order to have the maximum number of panels in terms of transportation. So that was designed, and also how do you place them on site was very easy to apply. This is another interesting thing. When we were visiting the factory, we saw this on the floor. So this is a gutter, and we asked them, can we turn this into vertical mullions? And of course, there they are. So it's an industrial fixture that became a facade thing. This is the courtyard of the teachers. Again, we organized the school in order to have different opportunities for the students to dwell, but also for the teachers. This area is a shortcut in terms of service areas for the school. And this is the main square, the one that the students call it the learning square. And as you can see, there is a slight slope. And then is also these hollow points that we call it the colonnade. And the colonnade became a dwelling area. So the students, it was designed according to the human body, and the students can dwell there as they like. And so the color is another thing that we did, because there is only color in one side. So if you look from the other side, you don't see any color like in this facade. And yet, when you are there facing this way, you don't see color this way, but you will see color that way. Okay, so another way. So that one, I would say, the old just became the DNA and the new took over the old. This one was a very hard competition, because was actually the site itself, the ground area of the site, was pretty much an archaeological site. So all this, the facade and everything, are standing in the air, because even if it's a library, as you can see it here, the important part is that the archaeological findings are underground. And so all this building is a sort of a shell that does not touch in the middle of the building, is only on the edges of the site that we can have structure, so that the building is float above this archaeological site. So in this case, we brought it here because it's in one condition that the new became a sort of a floating device to shelter the importance of the old. And so this is one condition that is very rare to happen, but we thought it could be interesting to bring it up to you.
This is the last one.
This is the last one. So.
This is a competition. We also got a national competition, an open competition. We got the first prize. And it's for this megalithic museum. And in Mora, which is, again, east of Lisbon, apparently is where one of the highest concentrations of megalithic archaeological findings exist. So when we were invited to, when we got the commission to do these, we worked from day one with an archaeologist and an historian, so that the artifacts and the content of the exhibition spaces would always keep in mind something, which was the fact that there's a lot of small artifacts that can be exhibited in the building, but the experience is to go out to the landscape and see the work in the field. And the interesting thing about this was that the site of the competition and the site for the museum was a former railway station. The railway station had been abandoned for quite some time. One can see the railway tracks, and there were a series of pavilions, a main station, a warehouse, and the public washrooms, and we had to make a decision about what buildings to keep, what buildings not to keep, and basically the program introduced a permanent exhibition space, an administration building, an educational space, and a small cafe. So we looked at this building. We wanted to keep the character. We wanted to keep the scale and the feeling of the presence of these buildings. A lot of these buildings are designed just the same, and then kind of land on every single small town. But we were interested mostly in the scale of the main station, and then the exposure of the wooden elements of the warehouse. So one of the questions was, how do we then add something that you can see from the building on your left and the building on your right, and in ways is more than double of the existing built fabric, but is respectful of the scale of the site. And so one of the things we thought about was that we looked at the platform where we would wait for the trains to come whenever they would show up, and use that platform as the linking element between the different pavilions. This allowed us to separate the buildings, not to have one building, but to continue this idea of the several pavilions. And you can see that the width of these is not that different. And by having this fabric a bit transparent, we could mediate between the scale of the site, the scale of the landscape, the scale of the existing buildings, and the scale of the whole new project working together. Also, part of the site had an urban design for a park developed by a landscape architect that had nothing to do with our project. But we were very much concerned about, at least on this site, which is where the main entrance of the museum is located, to not only design the program for the museum itself, but to design the public spaces in front of the museum, so that we would integrate the spaces around the museum as much as possible as part of the project for this new building. So this is something you can see from the park, which is this element that stitches the whole project. It is built on top of the former railway platform, and then also how then the link, the park is on your right, the street is on your left, would also mediate between the different levels of the landscape. And here you can see the warehouse became the educational spaces where the structure is very much exposed. So for us, it was also an opportunity for children to not only learn about the megalithic, but also to slowly learn about how the building was put together and about the architectural elements of the museum. And so this, you can see the train, you can see the platform as this linear element that binds this together, and the different pavilions across the park. And these are drawings that we had to do for the competition, just to show things like thermal bridges, how the old and new would be brought together, and to explain how we thought of this being something feasible. So here you can see opening day, how then the building opens up to the city, to the town of Mora, and how these several elements really help characterize and respect the scale of the different buildings within this place. Working with lighting engineers and designers so that the structure would be highlighted, and then the patterns on the left that I'll talk a little bit about in a minute were also a way to bring light inside. The corridor is still an outside space, it's not an internal HVAC treated space, so that air could flow between the buildings. And this is how new and old played together, bringing the wooden structure as it was to the outside, and how this element then provided a way of bringing natural light and natural shadows in a very diverse way to the site. So this was a piece of stone that the historian brought to our attention, and we looked at it as a source of inspiration to define a series of patterns that would then help characterize these facades. the great advantage with nowadays technology is that we could do this with no concern about repetition. So every panel is a different panel because these things are mainly plotted and cut through a laser cutter. And we worked with fabricators to think about the diversity of panels. I think we have about 16 different panels. And the only concern is sometimes the gaps between, I mean, there are certain things if they are too fragile, but just the integrity of the panels and also avoiding elements like these that if they were at this height, they could be somewhat hurtful for kids as they move along. And this also creates a series of filters between inside and outside. We always ask for prototyping, so several tests of more opaque or less opaque and slightly different colors to tune how this thing would be presented itself to the site. You can see that the existing warehouse was very much kept. The wooden structure was very much kept. The only difference is that all of these had to be reinforced structurally because of seismic reasons, and also thermally speaking, this building cannot have any cold bridges, so we had to thermally insulate it, structurally reinforce it, and still keep it very open to the city. So we're interested in having these big windows so that people would be able to walk along the sidewalk and see what kind of activities could be taking place indoors. We worked with an exhibition designers, P06, and their contribution, this is the building on the left-hand side, their contribution was quite amazing as they thought about this idea of sedimentation and playful sedimentation, so that all these layers of wood is the place where the small archaeological findings were going to be displaced. And also some of them allow people to go up and down. So these are not just sites you see, are sites that you could visit. So that's an interesting way of playing with this exhibition design as part of a landscape to accommodate not only how objects would be seen, but also how we could enjoy them, the landscape, as we would visit these sites. And this is a photograph of the building from the park before the park was completed. The park was completed a little after the building. Then we can see the diverse scales of the different buildings and how then you could see the town of Mora, how the building is presented itself to the landscape and to the town. I think this is it. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Quite sad.
Sim, se calhar. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, Diogo. I must say that I'm also, thank you for the lovely presentation, but I must say that I'm also amazed with the body of work that you developed on these last, I believe, last 10 to 12 years. Because most of we know very well, we had offices closed, and this is almost everything new for me somehow. I will not say new, but I mean, I haven't seen all your works put it like this together, and I think it's an amazing body of work that you've developed these last 10 years. And I understand now better, seeing everything together, why you give the title to your presentation of interweaving. I understand that is something that is unifying most of your works, this idea of interweaving spaces. But I think more than that, that is just not spaces. You talk about these informal spaces that you always have in your work. And I think it's also kind of interweaving memories.
Oh, yeah.
That's the way you establish. It's not just spaces. I think you can connect the memories and collective memories. So it makes sense in this idea of preserving the buildings, but also preserving the memories. So my question I have for you is, going back to Macau, and since Macau is also a city of memories, and you had a long experience here, you've been in different spaces. In which way do you still bring your life experience from Macau? If you feel that you still bring something of this experience to your work of our days, that I understand it's much influenced by this contemporary Portuguese architecture, but in a very unique way. But I think I will be interested in knowing how, after all these years, you feel, and now that you visit again the city, if you feel that in certain way you still have memories from your experience in Macau that might be still perceived in your work.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting because when I arrived here, I have to say that we were living in London. I was working with Zaha Hadid, and then somebody told me, Macau, they might be offering you a job. And I said, I'll go. I'll go immediately. So you see, it was a big transformation. I was fascinated by the Chinese side of Macau. Diogo, on the other hand, was the other side. So at home, both of us would have different point of views. So I was working in the pawn shop towers. Choi Tintin is there. She helped me a lot. But this is to say that I was trying to learn. I was trying to understand what are another look into architecture that it was not something that I would understand. So this discovery of ways and really go deep inside and really understand the whys was very fascinating to me. So yesterday we were talking, so for example, you could see that there was the galleries, the colonnades in Macau, but they are far deeper than they normally other places are. And I would say, it's almost like the balcony and the arcade became a sort of an extra room. And that is an incredible experience, not totally European, it's a mix of things. I also felt that ventilation, I was always amazed that the door would have an extra window on top for extra ventilation. And then, of course, the pawn shop towers were fantastic in terms of crossing ventilation. So I had very good memories to the point that I said, there are incredible things and there are adjustments to this climate that I have to learn more. And then I went to Harvard to learn sustainability. So for me, it was almost like, oh my God, there was no air conditionings before. And yet people would dwell in the architecture would manage to create that. Let me try to find something else. So definitely. Diogo is like, what?
So our experiences were very different, one of the things, I mean, I've worked with Isabel in Obras Públicas, with Manel, and a lot of us here work together, and with Irene and Antonio, and one could say that these were pretty different experiences. And one story I could say about a conversation around us with Manel when he would be like completely focused on one small detail that we couldn't really understand why was it so important, and he would point up and say because he cares, right? And then my experience, I would say, more with Antonio Irene was this sense of being very committed to this quiet way of understanding what is the role of architecture in our communities, and how could we, through commitment and rigor and vigor, pursue a level of quality that was quite unique. And one of the things that I find, at least from the work, is this idea of quiet intensity. That if we, in a way, design and draw spaces that may help us slow down, and that's why we have so many spaces interwoven where we interweave flows and permanence, so that one could be moving around, but there's some people sitting in that space. So there are a lot of small benches that are part of the architecture, and if we slow down and there's things that can capture our attention, we always hope that the possibility for us to enjoy spaces, architecture can happen, right? And so that is, let's say, how we, in my mind at least, I could intersect everything that I feel that I've been exposed, that I've learned from working with these amazing people. I was talking to Isabel yesterday about stories of learning how to deal with procedures and the building code and working with people. One of the things that I find is the greatest joy in architecture is you always work with people. And how do we bring the best out of each other? How do we work with people with so many different backgrounds? And how we allow each project to be a platform for conversations, obviously conversations in architecture, through making drawings, through experimenting, through getting in touch with the industry, with suppliers, with fabricators that allow us to, whatever drawings or design we're pursuing, they allow it to be developed, to come to fruition. I think this is one of the things I've learned about working with all these different people, and then just the fabrics, the drawings, the features, just that kind of level of attention that would somehow help us to slow down. And we feel we always move a lot through spaces in mostly a state of common distraction, and how again, I'm repeating myself, but this idea of playing with speed, if you slow down and pay attention, other things can happen. You can enjoy your surroundings in a very different way.
And at the same time, I can pick up on that, is the fact that, for example, even in a circulation, time is there. And whoever goes through one of these cool corridors, or even in Mora Station, people understand gradients of things that sometimes is about light, sometimes is a skylight that allows you to see from above, sometimes is the roughness of a wall that does not leave you indifferent. So it's almost as if the body is really attached to that particular point of the building, and hopefully you will not be indifferent, right? And sometimes we even talk to kids, and it's quite extraordinary, because I ask them, what do you like in the school? What is your place? And they all have a certain reason why they prefer an informal space instead of the other. And because the spaces can be appropriate, and they can select which one they want, and they like the diversity, and they always have a reason why this is their favorite. So the space as something that people will not be indifferent, and the body will react to that.
Okay, maybe we can ask if we have questions from the public.
Thank you for coming. I feel so fortunate that you came and share your beautiful projects with us today. It seems like you really have the ability to turn industrial cheap materials into $1 million. And it's
not
really,
always,
really
not
amazing.
always,
Well,
but sometimes.
you showed us some really good examples. But of all the projects, what caught to me was the idea of that art gallery that you showed. That you almost surrender to the public need or the public will to give in and give the path, the public path between your project, which makes me think and leads to my question: which mechanisms or tools do you use to read and interpret the, the present architecture and to keep the architectural significance and the cultural significance once you are done with the project.
Okay, yeah. So I can use that as an example. So the moment we get a commission, the first thing that we do is to spend time on site. And a lot of times we ask the client to bring people to the conversation. And it was very interesting because one day we were on site and there was this old woman trying to go through us. And I was like, wow, she's assuming it's hers. So I was asking, so if she's doing this, it means that she's allowed. And they say, yeah, but we like her, so we allow her to get in. And suddenly I said, okay, what if art became part of the path? And for them, for the first time, they thought, oh my God, we could open this to the public. It's not just for the ones we like and we like to cross or trespass, but why not make it public? So they were totally fine, especially because they were artists. The directors of the art gallery were not so pleased. So there was a compromise. And what was the compromise? There are a gate at the main building on the lower level of the square. As you can see, is a wood gate, is a wood door. And there is another gate up above. And so if there is an issue, they can always have that as a tool to close it and to turn it private. I was asking how many times did they close the gate? Not as many, which makes me or us very pleased. But so it was a conversation. It was, and suddenly when people start to get in and maybe that very old women start to go and visit the art gallery, art became to the street, which is fantastic. They loved it. But initially it was not in the program.
And another thing I could add is how do you work with people and make strategic decisions about, let's say, for instance, where to locate programs? So there's a tiny little shop is right on the left side. There's a bit of a distance that allows the doors to open in the space between what is the cafe on the ground level that opens up to the square so that the space can be as much used as possible. And then how the location of the lift and some of the windows of the multi-purpose room upstairs were located so that you could easily go in and see if there's anything going on. And then just the first building up above is for workshops and activities. So if you look at these ingredients and say, well, I mean, the cafe could be here or there or above or the ground. So just looking at how locating these activities can contribute for not only, let's say, those who are managing the building, because the building will have a life beyond whatever we may think, but also how then they can pick up on some of these ideas. They're not necessarily our ideas. They are ideas that are part of conversations that we have when we were locating these things to focus on what if and what could happen here. And the other thing we find that for us has been quite natural is we follow up. We tend to visit the buildings and see the buildings go back or go forward, and just maybe because of these conversations, these relationships we've been able to establish, that we continue to talk about what went wrong, what needs to be fixed, what could be done here and there. And that's also quite a humbling experience because we realize that all of us had some ideas and some of them are being further explored. Some of them have never been put into practice. And also some buildings, their management, let's say, the people who are managing a building may change over time, as these are buildings that belong to small municipalities. And this is one of they said that the delightful qualities of democracy every 4 years or 5 years. Some changes may be more drastic, and some changes may be less drastic. And
Living organism.
it's a living organism, and I would say one of the things that for us is important is that we somehow, for us it's important, we somehow try to find a way to keep conversations going no matter who is in charge of the building. So that is almost a way of developing a conversation, a relationship between people that allow, mostly in our minds, for them to keep counting on us if they need anything.
I can give you also an interesting example, which is this tapestry museum. Diogo was mentioning about the ceilings that always have a skylight. In the beginning, the client was asking, why do you need the skylights and so on? So they understood, because that ceiling is almost like a device to allow different experience and so on. We had no items to have in that museum because part of the collection of the town hall was totally destroyed. The old tapestries were gone. So when the museum opened, there was just empty walls, and we were devastated because there was nothing to exhibit. And then the town hall decided, okay, since those skylights can be open, we can bring women inside, and they start to stitch the new tapestries for the museum. So that became, in the beginning, it was like a workshop. But it was not, so the light was natural lighting, and they work inside. So that was marvelous, because at the time we were not expecting that opportunity. It's good.
The other question?
Beautiful projects, lovely presentation. I like the dialogue between you two, jumping around.
It has names.
No, it's beautiful to hear the story of a couple, and they are both architects. Actually, in Macau, we have a lot of couple architects, which is a nice, interesting observation. Once a friend of ours told me. What I want to ask is a deeper question is, you've been in Macau, but you've never projected or designed a building in Macau. And since with all that, your experience from participatory design, problem solving, which becomes your design, which is, I think, one of the most interesting way of designing in your projects. What would you problem solve here in Macau, and you try to design something new? Of course, depends on the client. You could create your own client. Now that you are here in Macau, after how long? 20 years?
27.
27 years. Now that you have been reacquainted with the surroundings, what do you think you would like to design here?
You? That is a tough one.
But I would say that one of the things that when one graduates, the idea of having an office or being the architect is obviously something that we talk about, and I did feel that at least for myself, the experience I had with both Antonio and Irene and Manel I did feel allowed me to be very much involved with the work we were doing. So that's this need or idea about, oh, you haven't designed anything. But I feel I was very lucky to participate in processes that left buildings that are here amongst us and are living organisms. So that process in itself is something that maybe when we start practicing, We don't realize how important all those layers, all those years, as I don't like to call them formative years because I think we are perpetually in formative years, still wanting to learn and wanting to improve and wanting to be better doing what we do. We've been here for just 5 days. This is a very dense and complex city. And one of the things that because I've played sports here, I'm very curious about the Mongha, like gymnasiums on top of gymnasiums. It's kind of an interesting program. I'm interested in knowing more about Areia Preta, the Ilha Verde, all these areas that were developing a lot of housing projects, and we've been told that there's a lot of housing happening in that area.
And new reclamations.
Yeah, but I would say, just personally, my passion is kind of working with the community, for a community, buildings of a certain scale that will allow people to be engaged, not only the design process, construction process, and then when buildings get their own life. It's very curious to see what happened to Tapsiak and the archives and these kind of buildings that have multiple lives and multiple lives, multiple people working there. So walking today, for instance, along Namvan and Saiwan, and just the edges of Zone C and D, the way the edges of those pieces of land are facing the lakes was something that was brought to my attention, and I feel that there's some buildings that create a very clear front to the lakes, and some buildings seem to create more of a back to the lake. So I'm curious to see how the lakes could be as public as possible. Last night I think we were at the Fa, which is by the waterfront, right? So how then programs and places are built, generated, and business are allowed to happen, so that this idea of living at the edge between water and land can be enjoyed as much as possible. I don't have an answer. Obviously, we are triggered to, again, be more focused on public buildings, but buildings that will have a sense of responsibility to the community that they will be serving, let's say. Some of the museums are not only for Riolos, are not only for Mora. They have also small towns, but with a lot of tourism as well. But for us, it's important that the community around the work that is being done is not only involved, but is engaged in a meaningful way with how the building then lives. As a public building, I'm very curious about the new library by Tapsiak and to see what will happen there. And I'm open to suggestions and questions. I don't have any fixation in terms of sites or programs, but I find that there's a lot that can be done by the waterfront in the lakes, and there's a lot of opportunities for those spaces to be done in a way that people really enjoy them. I know that there's the square and the tower in Zone C and D. Now it's full of a food court or something that's kind of the gastronomy festival. But I'm curious about how these spaces have a lot of potential for people to feel that they can use them and stay there and enjoy them.
Now that you mention, I can try to say something. So at this point, I am like this kid that somebody gives a candy. So I'm tasting it and I'm enjoying every minute. I really enjoy what I saw here. So I'm delightful, and I'm learning. I mean, the casinos are new to me, so I'm very impressed. And I think the city is vibrant, the city is full of life. So that is really nice to see. However, I came from Canada last week. The city in Canada, it's so different. It's a city of silence. It's a city of silence. Everything is you know, not big density. I can walk in the city and not seeing anybody. And so maybe I'm being very selfish, but I think, I don't know which program would it be, but I think I miss a little bit of my Canadian silence here. I don't know how that would be, but it's too much going on. So my candy is still here. I'm enjoying it. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Just a follow-up. For instance, the work that when we realized I was coming here, I immediately asked Sergio, you know, could you please ask Antonio if we could visit the United Nations University building that I worked for 6, 7, 8 months in my life. I think I told Antonio, it's just more of a private conversation, that when we finished the design, I felt like I had lost a friend, like, because I had been working on that project for such a long time. But I was very, very curious to see how the building is. It's been like 25 years since it has been built. I was very, very surprised with how the gardens and the building are living together, and that site with the levels, how the building is so sensitive to the gardens and so on. So looking at things to design, things that would be amazing, is how do you look at all this cultural heritage, all these many, many stories in the past, and buildings not only built 200, 300, 400 years ago, but we're looking at buildings that were built along the 20th century and have a unique character in the way they adapted themselves, or the designers, the architects adapted their ways of thinking about architecture into this particular climate, how these buildings have been designed, built, and sustained the time, and probably the multiple uses. And I think those buildings require a lot of attention, a lot of care, a lot of love, and it's, for me, quite interesting, for instance, to walk along Lealsnad and see small bits of interventions within existing buildings with either great architectural value or not so great architectural value, but there's life beyond the time when these buildings were built. So I think there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of responsibility we all have as architects to look at, let's say, the length of time buildings have been within us, and to see how can we take care of them, how can we revitalize them and bring them to new lives. I'm quite sure that there's lots of latent episodes, latent opportunities around Macau for like big heritage sites to small, more humble and small buildings that obviously throughout the 20th century there's a lot of conversations about what to keep, because obviously a lot of these buildings were also done as pure experiments. So the way they were designed, the way they were built, they obviously, it's not that they failed the test of time, but they were pushing the agenda, the limits of what could be done at that time, and so they are fragile.
And some are still too close to us to perceive the value.
Exactly.
And to be able to perceive the value.
So I'm trying to answer to your question.
Bonito. Muito obrigado.
I don't think we did.
Estava a ver que não fazias pergunta nenhuma.
Well, I'm not surprised with the passion and your ability to conceptualize everything. We know it for some decades. But I was surprised with the process of communication. Going to the site and try to think as the final user. I didn't know that in your process. I would like to understand when and why you found that process. And in the end, it's like when we are writing, we always have this duality, what people want to read or to live, and the things we know they should want and they don't. So how do you manage that process, or those decisions when you are in the process of communication? Because I think it's everybody lives that in different industries.
I can just answer as a way of sharing stories. For instance, the Arraiolos Museum, one of the historians hired by the municipality was from a different political party. So the design was always an object of backfiring and arma de remessa. I don't know how to say this in English, but just like we were in the middle, we were like a paintball ball, ping, boing, ding, dong, right? And we always asked, and sometimes it's not easy for us to present these projects publicly, because somehow by engaging with the public, the understanding of why are we spending so much money on this particular building when there's people who have no water still, how we help municipalities to advocate for the buildings that they are investing some money in, and just from early on spending time in archaeology and getting to know within this municipality who were the characters and the set of people that we had to listen to and to work with was very important. So knowing that it's not about having a conversation or a fight with this person, it's about understanding how we could use some of the energies and turn them into something that could be very positive, or feeling that they have a contribution. And a lot of times we come across people who feel they have no voice, and how we use these public presentations to allow them to have a voice, or to feel that they have something to say, something to contribute. And a lot of times we are not from these small towns, and we listen to people saying, because I've been telling this for many decades and so on, nobody listens to me, and to find a way that we're here listening to them is quite important. Another meeting at the school where there was obviously the school needed to expand, and this is in an area in Lisbon that is a bit let's say unsafe, and there's a particular professor who brings all their tools to the school, so the prospect of losing a private car park spot inside the school is outrageous. So out of a public presentation, someone says we should have a swimming pool, right? And there's someone from the Ministry of Education, and we can do anything, right? It's a new brief, and how do you mediate between something that, I mean, it would be great to have a swimming pool or something, but how then we allow these conversations to take place and bring what needs to be registered, and so the school still has some car park spots there, and we allow them to organize an area where then they would have to mediate whoever gets access. But part of that conversation was another professor saying that no, we should all take buses. I mean, cars, we should look at the planet, and so suddenly it becomes a huge conversation about ecology and the planet, and so on and so forth. So we would like to think that it's quite a chaotic conversation. We still have to present the drawings, the conversations around the drawings that we've been spending 6 months working, and suddenly we have a 5-minute presentation and it can destroy completely the work. But I find that if we figured out ways to explain things that they can connect to, it's about your life, it's not about my life, then the conversations about are slightly different. And that's I would say, without wanting to sound too pompous about it, it's a bit of an art, and to knowing that we're not here, we're not in this presentation moderating the debate, but we want sometimes to help the moderator saying, but I want to listen to you as well, right? And doing that in a way that still feels or helps people feel respected in that audience. And another episode, we convinced the school to present the school to the students. And these are students from a very poor neighborhood. And we learned that some of these families, the only meal these kids had during a day was the meal provided by the school. So the director was very worried about it. It could be like throwing tomatoes. I mean, kids like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, But we kind of push this. We need to love to present this to the students, so that this kind of handpicked a group of students, and for us to present in a classroom. And one of the things that Christine and I figured out was, okay, how many students the school has? 1,300. And so we came up with this number. You know how many people work in this building? 1,300 people, right? And they kind of know that the school has 1,300 students. And then the students ask amazing questions. Why some of the walls were deeper, right? Because we had ducts coming from the roof to the bottom floor. So why some doors are heavier? Because they are fire-rated doors. So I found that the questions were amazing. And then some of the artists, the arts and history students were asking questions about the colors and so on. So we really felt, I mean, they were really paying attention. Right? So it's one of these things when the design or the drawings have a little bit of intensity. Maybe it's not the stories that they are telling us, but it's our ability to tell stories about them. So how do we connect? So that's kind of where we try to provide enough elements that can capture our attention. So the building can communicate as well. It sometimes it's two of us presenting normally as well, so this kind of contradicting each other can sometimes, it's not really what we wanted to can help sometimes as well. So it's creating a dynamic environment where the community feels a bit safe. It's a safe space for them to make sure their voices are heard. That's what we try to do, successfully or not.
And of course we miss a lot, right? So it's part of the experience. And I remember first time we arrived in Portugal, a lot of our work was private commissions. And I never forget, there was this very hard client. It was all about money. And we were pushing him to design a bench in front of the building. And it was so hard to convince him about the bench. But he finally did it. He's almost like, who cares? I don't want to listen to these two of them, so I'm going to make the bench. Months, if not years later, he called us. In the middle of nowhere, we had no relationship with that guy. The building was done. And he said, I'm just calling you because I'm sitting in your bench and I love it. And I was like, oh my God, this is better than an award, right? That's the best award. But he finally got it, you see? That was so amazing because sometimes, again, I mean, we try and we can't make it, but there is one day that we get this phone call and that's worth everything, right? So passion for architecture, as you can tell, is in our body. But it's been a learning process, for sure. It's been a learning process. I mean, of course, there are things that we're learning. There are things that we already know this could work, this could not work. But he's always trying, right? He's always trying. And every conditions and even new situations in the world make us to think, right? So we already design many students' residencies. The ones that we are designing now, different things they are requesting. And we thought we knew it already. And suddenly it's like, oh no, double bedrooms, no way. And we were like, but it's going to be more expensive and so on. But different generations, different attributes and so on. And we keep on learning from the beginning because the other recipe is not working anymore.
Regarding scissors, one of the points is that it's not so much the bedrooms, of course, but it's the garden. It's a space where they will gather and share stories and play games, and so those spaces for us are crucial. Just like the circulation, the flows, and the permanent spaces is where other things can happen. This is where we will meet friends that will stay with us for years and years and years.
Done.
I don't know. No other questions. Maybe we conclude. Thank you, Cristina. Thank you, Diogo.
Thank you.
Hope you can come back soon.
Thank you so much. This was so nice.
Acho que ainda vamos ao concerto do Tito.
Just a